Charlie Kirk as the inaugural guest on the Gavin Newsom podcast. And of course you did a great job. And of course you made news with him on his own podcast by getting him to admit that it's unfair to allow boys to compete against girls in girls sports, which was great. You were your typical on-point substantive self, and he couldn't resist.
Charlie Kirk gives Megyn Kelly the tea on his podcast appearance with Gavin Newsom and explains why he did such a thing, because they have a bit of a disagreement here, as you'll see in just a moment. I think you're going to like it, guys. You know, it's always good to see a nice, healthy debate amongst conservatives and liberals, and also between conservatives with each other. So we'll get right into it. It's going to be fun. But first, do me a huge favor here. Like our video and share it around so we can keep bringing you all this great, hard-hitting content. As always, Patriots, I'm your host, Darian, and this is Resist the Mainstream.
Charlie Kirk as the inaugural guest on the Gavin Newsom podcast. And of course you did a great job. And of course you made news with him on his own podcast by getting him to admit that it's unfair to allow boys to compete against girls in girls sports, which was great. You were your typical on-point substantive self, and he couldn't resist giving you what is such an obvious point, and one on which even the Democrats are with him over 70%, even though lawmakers won't admit it. But here's what I said. And you know I love you, and I love Steve Bannon too. I don't like to see it, because my own feeling is this guy's in training for 2028 against JD. Probably, that's what we think, will likely be the standard bearer for the Republican Party. And he needs practice. We saw that when he debated Ron DeSantis on Hannity. He needs practice. He's not very good at it. And we should not be helping him. Like, the more times he sits across from Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon and any of our sort of lead fighters, the better he will get, the better he'll do, the more he'll understand how to appeal to people who are more right-wing or independently minded, but on the right. And he doesn't deserve our help. And we shouldn't be in there, like, giving him the assist. So explain to me why you disagree.
Well, first, I mean, understand, being the inaugural guest, it wasn't really even sure what I was going into, right? Because at the front end, it was like, hey, you know, there'll be no, gotcha questions. It'll just be a discussion, which was largely true. And secondly, when you arrive and they tell you all this stuff, they're like, oh, his son is a fan and all that. It was like so over the top, like charm offensive. I was like, are you going to want to become a member of Turning Point or something, Governor Newsom? It was like it was like almost like nauseatingly positive, right? Mm-hmm. That in that way, it was very difficult to navigate. I will say, if you look at Gavin Newsom's numbers, there's a Newsweek article, though. His numbers are down dramatically as far as favorability, trust, authenticity since he started his podcast. It's not going very well for him of how people view him. So for that, I will say that I think we have done a good job of exposing him for being the synthetic fraud that he actually is. I will give him credit for having the discussion. Great. They didn't edit any of it. That deserves credit, because they very well could have edited the trans thing out. But I do understand completely where you're coming from, Megyn. However, I would just view it a little bit differently. I don't think that Gavin Newsom is getting his spring training to become a presidential candidate. I think he's actually being exposed as someone who will not be able to get through a Democrat primary. He's making a very calculated bet that no one's going to remember that he was a failed governor, that no one's going to remember that he literally has no accomplishments, and that he's going to try to run to the middle and to be able to take his Democrat base for granted. The Democrat base, as exhibited, as how they're acting in the streets and how they're acting in Congress, is not moderating on these issues. In fact, I think this podcast might be ending Gavin Newsom's presidential ambitions, not preparing him for his presidential ambitions. Again, all this is just speculation and conjecture. And then I will also speak just for myself personally why we decided to do it. Being the first guest, we consider that to be a pretty cool opportunity to be able to sit down and disagree and even debate at times with the governor of the world's, the largest state, the fifth largest economy in the world. And I do think that sitting down and being able to educate, which was well over 30 or 40 million people that ended up consuming our conversation, which was the most listened to so far of all the ones, of people that were in the middle and people that were at least politically curious, I think was really helpful. I got text messages from people in the tech world, CEOs, some of the wealthiest people on the planet, and also just rank and file normies, if you will, people that aren't exactly as politically engaged as you and I are, Megyn, that were persuaded far more of the presentation of ideas that I presented, far more than what Gavin did.
Now look, It's quite clear and obvious that Kirk made better points than Newsom did on the podcast. Duh, you can know that without even watching it. But I do have to question some of Kirk's premises that he puts forward here. For instance, that, Gavin Newsom is banking on people having essentially short memories. Is that really an unreasonable thing for Newsom to be banking on? I mean, seriously, just look at the COVID reaction. How many Americans have forgotten about that, including people on the right wing who oppose this stuff? Many of them are already over it. Many of them, in fact, are not even mad at the Republican representatives who went and actually helped stoke that along with the Democrats. So maybe people's memories aren't as good as Kirk is seemingly suggesting here. Also, I do think it's very much a cynical ploy on the part of Newsom to, kind of build relatability amongst, the middle of the road people and whatnot. Just take that story for his son, for instance. I think he made that up. All right. And Charlie seems to kind of sniff that out too. It's quite obvious. All right. And I'll tell you why. Newsom said that he couldn't let his son not go to school for one day, because his son so badly wanted to talk to Charlie Kirk. But Newsom said, nope, you have to go to school. You can't be missing school. 1 day off was too big of a deal. But as Charlie pointed out on that podcast, he shut down schools for 2 years. Not a problem. No biggie at all. Have at it, buddy. What? It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't add up. Now, I can just see it right now. Newsom one day running in the 2020 election saying, I'm a real middle-of-the-road, moderate guy. I had dialogue with Charlie Kirk of Turning Point years back on my podcast. Blah, 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 blah. I'm relatable. We got to be cautious of these people. That's all I'm saying. They are very sinister, and they're up to no good.
And so the final point I'll make is this, is that it wasn't just about Gavin. It was also about the tens of millions of people that were able to get their eyes open and say, why didn't Gavin go stronger on the trans sports issue? Or why didn't he do this? And now Gavin Newsom, I could say this, you're seeing this all across the board. He is under non-stop siege, and he's handling it all wrong, in my opinion. Instead of doubling down and being like, I'm going to keep on going to war against the Democrat Party, he keeps on doing these podcasts with, people like us and trying to win favor with us, when in reality, that's not happening. He's becoming more unpopular with his own base. He's becoming least trusted with moderates. People look at him as a synthetic and as a fake, and I have no regrets of dialoguing with him.
So do you think more conservatives should say yes to him?
Only if they come after it in the way that I think we did, without being overly braggadocious. I think we were polite, but we were incredibly disagreeable and firm, and we were willing to challenge him and ask him questions about issues and get him on the record. If you notice, that's what we did with the trans thing. Yeah. It wasn't just hey, let's have a discussion.
I noticed.
I asked him a direct policy question. No, and so that's the only condition that I would say, is that insofar that it's not just kind of a bro session of hey, so good that Republicans and Democrats are talking, I don't think that's helpful for anybody. But the next time someone sits down with him, ask him an update. Hey, Governor Newsom, you said with Charlie Kirk that you think it's not fair. You have yet to do anything about it, sign an executive order, talk publicly about it, because a young man named A.B. Hernandez is about to win the long jump championship in California as a biological man. Why haven't you done something about it? Or are you just doing this podcast for clicks to try to make yourself seem more moderate? If Republican guest after Republican guest goes with that kind of attitude, be polite and firm, and hold him to the standard that he is setting on his own show, that will even collapse his political ambitions even further.
To Charlie's last point there, it's very important we remind people of how just crooked these Democrats are. All right, here's something about Joe Biden that was never brought up for some reason. He dropped out of the 1988 presidential election because he plagiarized a speech and then basically left in disgrace. The speech was by a British politician who talked about his father going hard at work in the coal mines. Biden made up the same speech with slight tweaks for himself and then left. And what a dinosaur that guy is. 88 to 2024. That's almost 40 years. Just insane. Point being, if Biden could bounce back from it, Newsom could too, unless you take him down the right way. With all that being said, everybody, that wraps up our video for today. Thank you for tuning in. As always, comment below. Let us know what you liked about the clip, what kind of stuff you want to see in the future. Hit that subscribe button, and that way you can make sure that we'll see you again soon. God bless.